She was still in her work uniform. They took her from me.
So such a tragedy, a 3-year-old now without a mother. If you have any bit of information about this ruthless killer, you're asked to call Crime Stoppers.
The man you're looking at isn't just an ordinary man. He's a contract killer. And just moments before this clip was taken, he ended the life of a young mother and left her 3-year-old daughter covered in blood. This wasn't a random shooting. It was planned, paid for, executed without mercy. The victim? A 24-year-old woman who worked hard every single day to build a better life for her little girl. She had no idea that someone she knew had already marked her for death. Who wanted her gone? And why did this young woman have to die in such a brutal way? The truth will leave you speechless. Before we go any deeper into this shocking story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss cases like this. And tell me in the comments, what do you think pushes a person to hire a killer? Is it jealousy, anger, or something far more dangerous? I'll be reading every single response. Lashani Jones was only 24 years old, but in those years, she had lived through struggles most people couldn't imagine. Despite everything, she carried herself with grace. She wasn't the kind of person who wanted the spotlight. She just wanted a life of peace and stability. And in her own way, she was building that life, one small step at a time. Her story started like many young women, full of determination, but with obstacles at every corner. She didn't grow up wealthy. There were no shortcuts for her, no favors handed out. Everything she had, she worked for. She began at Walmart, clocking in long hours for little pay. Most people would have given up on dreams at that point, but Lashani wasn't like most people. She saw that job as a stepping stone, not a dead end. She had a goal, a career that gave her security and, more importantly, allowed her to care for the one person who mattered most, her daughter, Elijah. That little girl was her reason for everything. Every tough day, every moment Lashani felt like quitting, she reminded herself why she couldn't stop. And eventually, all that persistence paid off. She joined the TSA as an officer at Miami International Airport. For Lashani, that uniform wasn't just about scanning bags or standing at checkpoints. It was a symbol of progress. It was a sign that she could create the life she had always wanted for Elijah. Motherhood defined her in the best way. Lashani wasn't just a mother. She was devoted beyond measure. Friends recall how her face lit up whenever she spoke about Elijah. Her phone was filled with pictures of her daughter, from her very first steps to every silly smile. She'd brag about how smart Elijah was, how she wanted to give her opportunities she never had. Her dreams were simple, but they were everything to her. She wanted a small home with a yard where Elijah could run around. She wanted family dinners at a table that belonged to them. She even talked about going back to school, maybe starting her own business one day. Lashani was always looking ahead, always planning for that brighter tomorrow. People who knew her would tell you she had this quiet strength about her, a resilience that made others admire her. No matter how heavy life felt, she carried it with a smile. She had hope, and for a young mother raising a child on her own, hope can mean everything. But while she was focused on creating a better future, someone else was focused on destroying it. And the way they did it, cold, calculated, and heartless, would leave everyone asking the same question: why her? May 3rd, 2021, started like any other day for Lashani Jones. It was a Monday, and she had just finished her shift as a transportation security officer at Miami International Airport. For her, it was another long day on her feet, guiding passengers, checking bags, and making sure travelers were safe. She was tired, but it didn't matter, because every hour at work meant another step toward the life she wanted for her little girl. When her shift ended, she did what she always did. She drove to her sister's home, where Elijah had spent the day. The moment her daughter ran into her arms, it was like all the stress from work melted away. That smile, that hug, that was everything to Lashani. They had a short chat with her sister, nothing unusual, just family talk. Then she buckled Elijah into the back seat and started the drive home to Coral Bay Cove Apartments. It was early evening, and the neighborhood was calm. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft orange glow on the apartment buildings. Lashani parked her car in the usual spot and stepped out with Elijah by her side. Holding her daughter's hand, She walked toward their front door, just like they had done countless times before. What she didn't know was that someone had been waiting, watching. As she got closer to the entrance, a gray Nissan pulled up slowly. It didn't look alarming at first. Cars passed through the complex all the time. But this one didn't keep going. It stopped just a few feet away from her. Before Lashani could even react, the driver's door swung open, and a man stepped out with a gun in his hand. The silence of the evening was shattered by the sound of gunfire. Loud, sharp, relentless. Witnesses would later say there were multiple shots, too many to count in those few terrifying seconds. Lashani had no chance to run. She was hit and collapsed right there on the pavement, just steps away from her home. Her little girl, Elijah, was right beside her when it happened. The child was caught in the chaos, struck by a bullet, but somehow, miraculously, she survived. Neighbors rushed out after the shooting stopped, their faces frozen in shock. The gray Nissan sped away, leaving nothing behind but shell casings and a young mother bleeding in front of the building where she lived. People screamed for help, calling 911, trying to do whatever they could. But it was too late. Lashani was gone before paramedics could save her. The news spread quickly. A young mother, murdered in front of her child in broad daylight. The community couldn't understand it. Why would someone target her like this? What kind of person could pull the trigger with a child standing there? And the most disturbing part, this wasn't random. Someone wanted her dead. The crime scene was swarming with officers within minutes. Bright yellow tape sealed off the entrance to the Coral Bay Cove apartments as detectives crouched over the shell casings scattered on the ground. Flashing lights painted the complex in red and blue, and neighbors stood behind the tape, whispering in shock. Some held their children close, unable to believe what had just happened in their quiet community. Lashani's body was removed with care, but the sight of a mother lying there, steps away from home, left everyone unsettled. Officers began collecting evidence immediately. Surveillance cameras were pulled from nearby buildings, and witnesses were questioned one by one. Every small detail mattered. The color of the car, the direction it sped off, the man's face, if anyone had seen it clearly. The police held a press briefing that same evening. Reporters gathered, their microphones raised as the spokesperson confirmed the victim's identity and her role as a TSA officer. They promised a full investigation and assured the public that no lead would be ignored. But the questions were relentless. Who would want to kill a 24-year-old mother? Why attack her so openly, in front of her child, without fear of being seen? Detectives called it targeted. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing had been taken. Whoever planned this came for one reason only, to end Lashani's life. That revelation sent a wave of fear through the community. If this could happen here, in broad daylight, was anyone truly safe? Her family was devastated, but they didn't stay silent. Standing before cameras, tears streaming down their faces, they pleaded for answers. Her mother's voice trembled as she begged, "Please, if you know anything, say something. She didn't deserve this. Her baby didn't deserve this." To push the investigation forward, authorities announced a $10,000 reward for any tip leading to an arrest. Flyers went up across Miami, and hotlines were flooded with calls. But nothing solid came in, not yet. Meanwhile, detectives kept circling back to the same haunting thought. This wasn't random. Someone wanted her dead. But who? And what could possibly drive someone to do this? The search for answers had just begun, and what they would uncover next would leave even seasoned investigators stunned. Weeks passed with investigators chasing every lead, but nothing concrete seemed to come up until they dug deeper into Lashani's past. Phone records, court files, and personal connections began to paint a picture that was far from simple. One name kept surfacing during interviews, a name that investigators couldn't ignore: Jasmine Martinez. Detectives soon discovered this wasn't a random name pulled out of thin air. Jasmine and Lashani had a violent history, one that dated back to 2018. That year, the two women got into a heated confrontation that ended in blood. It wasn't just a shouting match, it turned physical. By the time officers broke it up, Lashani was left bruised and shaken. Jasmine was arrested for the assault. But that wasn't the end of it. Their paths would cross again in a place neither of them wanted to be, the courtroom. And this time, the stakes were higher. While looking through court transcripts, investigators found something explosive. Lashani had testified in a major case involving Jasmine's ex-boyfriend, Kelly Nelson. He was a known figure to law enforcement, tied to drug trafficking and other serious crimes. When Lashani took the stand against him, it wasn't just an inconvenience for Kelly, it was a direct threat to his freedom. From that moment, Lashani's life changed. Friends recalled that she started receiving strange messages, subtle warnings telling her to keep quiet. There were whispers of money being offered, tens of thousands, to convince her to back off, to stay silent. But Lashani refused. She believed in doing what was right, even if it put her in danger. And that decision would make her a target. Detectives now had a motive, and it was chilling. A bitter feud, a violent past, and a courtroom betrayal. This wasn't just about anger or pride. It was about revenge, calculated and cold. Someone wanted payback, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get it. The question now was, how far would Jasmine go to make Lashani pay? Detectives had the name. Now they needed proof. As they dug into Jasmine Martinez's life, the pieces started falling into place. And what they uncovered left even seasoned investigators stunned. This wasn't just a grudge. It was a carefully planned execution. Jasmine wanted revenge. She couldn't let go of the fight from years ago, and she couldn't forgive Lashani for stepping into that courtroom. In her mind, Lashani had humiliated her and helped put her ex behind bars. For Jasmine, this was personal, and she wasn't going to move on. But the question remained, how could a single mother with no steady income pull off something like this? The answer came when detectives traced her financial records. That's when they discovered something shocking. Jasmine had recently received a PPP loan, pandemic relief money meant to keep small businesses afloat. Instead of using it for business, Jasmine had a different plan. She withdrew $10,000 in cash, and that money didn't go toward rent, bills, or groceries. It was the budget for a killing. Detectives would later uncover the key players in this deadly conspiracy. At the top was Jasmine Martinez, the woman who wanted Lashani gone. She didn't do the dirty work herself. Instead, she turned to Romeo Robinson, a man who acted as the go-between. His job was simple: find someone willing to pull the trigger. Romeo delivered and brought in Javon Carter, a man who didn't hesitate when offered easy money. Phone records revealed what happened next. For days, they exchanged coded messages, carefully avoiding direct language but making their intentions clear. Everything pointed to late April as the planning stage. They weren't in a rush. They wanted to make sure nothing went wrong. Then came the final move. Jasmine withdrew the money, handed it off, and the deal was sealed. The amount? $10,000 in cash. That was the price placed on Lashani's life. On May 3rd, the plan was carried out. Javon Carter was the one waiting in that gray Nissan. He was the man who opened fire, ending Lashani's life in front of her little girl. But it didn't stop there. Days later, Javon posted a video on social media, holding stacks of cash and flashing them for the camera. The very same money used to end a young mother's life was now being shown off like a trophy. This wasn't just murder. It was a killing bought and paid for, funded by government relief money meant to help people survive a crisis. And yet, one question still lingered. Would Jasmine get away with it? Or would her greed and arrogance lead investigators straight to her door? Detectives had a name. They had a motive. But in a case like this, motive wasn't enough. They needed hard evidence. So they started piecing together every fragment of information they could find. First, they pulled phone records. What they found was a trail of calls and messages linking Jasmine to Romeo Robinson, and then to Javon Carter. The conversations weren't open or obvious. The words were careful, coded. But when investigators read between the lines, the meaning was clear. This wasn't casual talk. This was coordination. Then came the surveillance footage. Cameras from nearby businesses caught glimpses of the gray Nissan circling the Coral Bay Cove apartments on the afternoon of the shooting. Hours later, the same car appeared on another camera across town, matching the timeline of the escape. Detectives didn't stop there. They dug into Jasmine's bank records. That's where the puzzle started to complete itself. A large withdrawal stood out. $10,000 in cash taken just days before Lashani's murder. The exact amount they suspected was used to pay for the hit. But the most damning piece of evidence didn't come from a bank or a camera. It came from social media. Just days after Lashani was gunned down, Javon Carter couldn't resist bragging. He posted a video online flashing stacks of cash, grinning into the camera like he had just hit the jackpot. Detectives compared the date of the post to the withdrawal from Jasmine's account. It lined up perfectly. That video became the nail in the coffin. By June 2021, the investigation reached its breaking point. Warrants were signed. Police moved in. One by one, the suspects were taken off the streets. Jasmine Martinez, the woman who set the whole plan in motion. Romeo Robinson, the middleman who connected the dots. And Javon Carter, the man who pulled the trigger and ended a young mother's life. Each of them was hit with heavy charges: first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and witness tampering. For the detectives who worked the case, it was a moment of relief. But for Lashani's family, it was a reminder that justice doesn't erase the pain. The truth was out. The story was clear. And yet, one question still lingers. How could someone go so far just to silence another person? For Lashani's family, life would never feel whole again. Her mother, who raised her with so much love and hope, could barely speak when reporters asked how she felt. With tears streaming down her face, she managed only a few heartbreaking words. "They didn't just take my daughter, they took away a beautiful soul, a loving mother, and the light of our family." The pain in her voice was almost unbearable. Every word carried the weight of a wound that would never heal. She talked about how Lashani was the kind of person who never hesitated to help others, someone who made sacrifices for her little girl every single day. And that little girl, she saw it all. She was there when the gunfire erupted. She remembers her mother reaching out, trying to protect her. Even now, she can still hear the sound of those shots in her head. Family members say she wakes up in the middle of the night screaming, asking for her mom. No child should ever have memories like that. The family struggles with anger, grief, and disbelief. They wonder every day why anyone would choose to destroy something so precious. And for what? They speak about Lashani in the present tense because letting go feels impossible. Her mother says she can still feel her daughter's presence in the apartment, like she's waiting to come home. But deep down, she knows that day will never come. This case didn't just expose a single act of violence. It revealed a much larger problem. Federal relief money was meant to help struggling businesses during the pandemic, to keep families afloat and doors open. Instead, some saw it as easy cash for personal gain, and in this case, to fund a murder. Thousands of dollars from a government program became blood money, proof that greed can twist good intentions into something deadly. It also shows how dangerous it can be when someone decides to silence a witness. Lashani stood for the truth, believing the court would protect her, but that decision put her life in jeopardy. Threats didn't scare her. Bribes didn't break her. She trusted that doing the right thing was enough, but for those who wanted revenge, it wasn't. And what about revenge? It never stops at anger. It grows, it takes over, and it blinds people to the cost. One argument years ago turned into a chain of choices that ended with a mother lying in the parking lot, her little girl screaming for help. 3 people now sit behind bars, and yet no one wins. A child lost her mother. A family lost their daughter. And all because someone couldn't let go of hate. Today, all 3 suspects are behind bars. Jasmine Martinez, the woman who planned the killing, was sentenced to life in prison. Romeo Robinson, the go-between who connected her to the hitman, is also serving time. And Javon Carter, the man who pulled the trigger, will never walk free again. But even with justice served in court, nothing can bring Lashani back. A young mother lost her life in front